Negative battery disconnect switch trick. Hard to say that when I'm sleepy and I have had a long night. As it happens, I kept a spare one of these new. It's in the box bag, all that stuff. And look, it's the same one. I had a big long video called Mechanics Quiz where this thing went bad and it fooled me again and again and again, and finally it fooled me. I failed my own quiz into buying a replacement battery, which the other one was 2/3 done, and I tried to sell it for 20 bucks, but because of the general dumbness of all battery buyers, I'm guessing no one bought it for 20 bucks. It's funny because you could return it anywhere for a core for 10 bucks, so it's actually a $10 battery in perfect shape. I had to test it and everything, but because of the general dumbness of everyone, I can't seem to sell it for literally $10, and it's fine. It passed its test, doesn't have a bad cell, holds a charge, passed the voltage drop thing test at Advanced Auto. It's a good battery. I can't sell it for $10 because of the general dumbness of, I'm guessing, of all people. I could be wrong, but I think it's just psychology. It has nothing to do with how good the battery is when you sell something. Anyway, many a times one thing just like this fooled me. I returned it, got another one. I got two another ones. I can't remember why. I guess it's a good thing I did, because now on my new one, and I got another battery, as I just said, and the other battery was too good. It was so good that the thing kept going into battery saver mode because of the amperage on it. The really good one, the 3-year one, was actually too good. So I got the 2-year one, no two pun intended. And that one doesn't do that, and it's fine. It's fine even when the car wouldn't start because there's a flimsy connection. It's the one the Force told me to get, and it's been perfect ever since. I returned the really good one, and for 50 bucks less, I got the 2-year one that's got 800 cold cranking amps, and the really good one has, or 825. The really good one has 875. Because smart computers aren't so smart. That's why I didn't want that thing going into battery saver mode when it didn't really have to. And since then, the other one's been perfect, just like the cheap one I had, which no one will buy, for $10, even though it works fine. In the end, this thing, the other thing like this, it wasn't the same type. It was this thing. It was this little, I said at the end of my mechanics quiz, this bolt had become slightly crooked, how I put it on, and then the only place that it makes actually electrical contact is that little disc on this green knob, combined with that disc down here. That's the only place that makes contact when you tighten it. And so what it was is the whole thing had become crooked a little bit, but once it's not totally flush, because neither of these circles bend, and one side of the circle comes up 1/millionth of a gazillionth of an inch or whatever, the entire circle comes up except for one little dot of the circle. Then the point of electrical contact is so weak, at least on Impalas, it's not enough to deliver high current to turn the starter motor over, and the car won't start. And it can have all kinds of electrical symptoms, a negative connection, and it could be anyone. You could think it's the starter, you could think it's the alternator not charging the battery enough, you could think it's a bad battery, you could think it's wiring to the starter, you could think it's infinity other things, which I won't start rattling off even 100 of because it's too much yip-yap. But in the end, it ended up being a thing just like this. It wasn't this one, it was slightly longer. This one's shorter, it's kind of cool. And fine, mystery solved. I did that, and it was a switch that was one of my mechanics quiz riddles. But then the video was over and I did everything, and then I realized it still wasn't starting. I'm like, well, maybe the whole thing made the battery go dead. Battery seems to be dead, blah, 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 blah. And so I got another battery, and when I was taking this thing off, I noticed, even though I looked at it, it looked totally clean. There's a battery terminal right here. When I could finally see the middle of this, there was a ring of some sort of, whatever you want to call it, brass corrosion, or whatever corrosion happens on brass battery terminals, right in the middle of it, all the way around. And you can't see it from the top. You couldn't see it from the bottom because it's on the battery, but you still wouldn't be able to see it from the bottom. It would look all plush and flush until you take this thing off the battery. And it was so small you couldn't see it when the terminal's installed. You think it's just tight fit. You can't turn this thing left or right. You know you've solved the problem with this. But then I look, and there's a little ring that's 3-dimensional, thin as it be may, which makes a separation from this entire thing and a weak plus connection. So in the end, I fooled my quiz. I'm thinking of the end of that movie with Keanu Reeves being the Buddha, when the guy goes, it appeared that the whatever, blah, blah, whatever, the ego, whatever, the thing that the devil had given up its try, but it had not yet given up his battle, and so it attacked again. And then he, Keanu Reeves, the Buddha, looking at his reflection in the puddle, and his hand reaches up out of the puddle, and he pulls another Keanu Reeves Buddha up, and he's talking to him. He's like, "I'm sorry, ego, you have not fooled me. You will not rebuild your house again." That kind of thing. This thing fooled me again. It reminded me of that. Because after I'd overcome the entire conundrum I said, where if this thing comes slightly crooked and these two things don't line up completely right, 1/millionth of an inch off, and then all of a sudden 99,000 million of that circle is no longer connected, because metallic things don't bend too much. And then there's just a tiny dot of a connection. It looks like it's totally flush, but it isn't. It's only touching in one spot. And then that causes countless electrical problems, which any electrician could either lie to you or just be wrong about, or a mechanic rather. And what it really is turning a knob like 1 gazillionth of an inch, but not. You have to take the whole thing apart, push this thing in again. This thing is in here, it's connected by the plastic, whatever that is. And when it's totally flush, then you tighten it, and then then it's totally parallel, and the entire circle touches. And that part of the riddle I had solved. And then I'm thinking, well, in the meantime, I made the battery go bad. This square was digging through this side of the thing too, after loosening it and attaching it a couple of times. And I solved this mystery, but yet there was another mystery right there, just like when Keanu Reeves, the Buddha's ego, tried to attack him one more time. He gave him some egotistical compliments, obviously, because that's what it was Keanu Reeves, the Buddha's ego. "You will not rebuild your house again. You are pure illusion. The earth is my witness." I'm quoting Keanu Reeves' Buddha on that. And then the Keanu Reeves became this scared, pudgy guy who was crying. And then he became enlightened, actually. No, he wasn't enlightened right then. He was just near enlightenment. And then when his ego didn't fool him. But in this case, the battery connector did fool me, and it fooled me into failing my own quiz and getting a new battery. And I was going to sell the other battery for $20, which is all it was worth after 2 years out of, it was a 6-month guarantee battery, and I already had it for 2 years. So I figured 1/5 of it's left. I bought it for $100. I figured it was worth $20, and everyone's too stupid to buy it for $20, unfortunately. Maybe I'll get wiser and learn how to steer people into buying it. It's a good deal for someone who's low on money and needs a battery for a while. But the point is, this connector fooled me again, just like Keanu Reeves' ego did on the Little Buddha. Good movie, by the way. Good music and all that stuff. So, fine, it was all done. I think I put a little thing whining about that at the end of that video for like 10 minutes, saying how it fooled me. But I've already been rambling on about this for 10 minutes, so no need to see that video. So, I had another one of these, like I just had, and here's a spare one. For some reason, I can't remember why I got two, but it's a good thing, because I screwed up the other one. And I got the right battery, the 2-year one from Walmart. Seems to be, for me, my taste, it seems to be right. I don't need them snazzy 3-year ones. Too snazzy with the computers and the way it reads the voltage with that higher cold cranking amps. The easy middle way, as it were. Buddha expression. I got the 2-year one. Hell, man, the 6-month one lasted for 2 years and it was still fine. So this thing fooled me again. And just now I'm driving around and I start to think, I've been driving around doing some scam dashing for a while. I turn the key, nothing happens, but I hear click, 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 and I look up on the internet and someone says that can be the solenoid, the connection to the solenoid is connected to the starter, the relay is connected to the solenoid, this, that, and the other. And I'm like, well, millions of times it's been this thing, even though it's not this one. So I'll go check, and I look at it, and I realize it's got wiggle like this, not this thing. This thing wiggling on this thing. I'm worried about my hands when I'm in video. I would use one hand. I have another hand, but I can't seem to get it in front of my own camera. This thing, this piece of metal, wiggling on this piece of metal. As you see on the new one, it does not wiggle left and right. This is the 5th time this thing has fooled me. I can't remember the 4th time, but I rattled off about 3 of them. This is, getting to the title of the video, the trick to this thing is when you put this on, let's say it's become disconnected for some reason, when you put this thing onto this thing, I'm talking about the whole pieces of metal, this piece of metal here, onto this piece of metal here, Don't put it on crooked and then tighten this thing to make it tighten on, because when it's crooked, and this whole thing is therefore crooked, and you tighten it crooked, you are pushing this rectangle into this plastic at a crooked angle, and yes, tightening it will pull this piece of metal on into this piece of plastic, but meanwhile it will squish the sides of this piece of plastic itself while it's forcing its way on, if it does ever, and then the plastic will be mushed and moshed and get literally thinner on one side, and then this thing, you can see in the one on the truck, but I'm not going to bother to film it right now, but like, even though on the one that I made this car, right now on this car, this thing is tightened all the way, super tight, and this thing literally moves on this thing as if this plastic has gotten thinner here and here. This thing moves now, and once this thing has left-right movement, it's flush. I can start this car and everything, but while it has the ability to move this rectangle within this plastic square and this rectangle, while it has left-right movement, it allows this thing to slowly unscrew over like a month or a year or a couple or whatever. And then once this unscrews, everything can become crooked. 999,000 millionth, blah, 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 of this circle come loose. Then this circle is not tight, and then the car won't start. All because this plastic has become squished by putting it on and installing this thing into this plastic rectangle and this piece of metal. From crooked to straight, it scrapes the sides of the plastic and squashes it. And now the plastic is loose, and this thing can always become loose, as it just had tonight. Notice, I read a little bit, I was thinking, oh crap, maybe I need a starter. It's raining. It was raining last night. And this time the starter's finally worn out. I put a starter in this like 3 years ago. I got another starter in the trunk, long story. A lot of people were hallucinating out of starter problems, so I bought another starter, gave me a spare. But I think I might have to do a starter that really sucks. I might have to get the right tools to take the rear catalytic converter off, which is the one in the front, and replace the starter, blah, 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 blah. But I said, first let me try this, because it's fooled me a million trillion times, and it has. This is the 5th way that it's fooled me, but it's fooled me like 200,000 times, which each the other way, so yeah, something like that. And this time, I'm like, look at that, I got it tightened, it's tightened and everything. I loosened it recently because I flopped I didn't have to, but I said, let me do it right. It turned out I did need the difficult blend door actuator, the one that's up there, it's hard to get your hands on. And I put the first one on. It was like a day or two old. You get scuffed up doing that one. I put one on, and it was a defaulty one, and then I put another on, and once I tightened it up, I'm like, crap, the connectors behind it, that was so stupid, I loosened it up and put it again, so that's like 3 times. Now that I finally know how to calibrate it, which no one does, no one on YouTube understands these switches like I just rattled off, apparently, from what I've found, and no one knows how to calibrate those things, the blend door actuator, properly. For one thing, everyone's saying, hook up electric to it. I won't put my hand on this because it's not it. Some people say hook up a plus and minus to it so you can turn it to the right angle. And then I was talking to Dorman, they said that's extremely dangerous, you can ruin it, don't do that way. And so one way to do it is if you get it and you're putting it on and the 2 circles don't line up, you can literally reach, well, there's a pole that you can move the door to the heater, but you can literally reach around with your pinky or something when it's almost about to slide on. There's a circle about to slide over, a football field thing about to slide onto the other football thing. You can reach around with your pinky or any finger and turn it to the right, to where it's at the right circular or past it, and then go chunk, and then friction of the switch holds it on, and you just wiggle the switch until the thing turns itself back. It's got a little spring on it. The flap door will actually do it. When it lines up with the thing, you can wiggle, and then the whole thing, the whole actuator slides onto it. Another thing that people don't know, that's a widespread myth that you should put electric to it to turn it. Another thing people don't know is you have to take the whole thing off, literally, and then you reset the car computer. There's some ambiguity about how to do that. You let the car computer reset, completely drain the battery, and then you turn it, and then when it's time to turn it back, to start installing this and putting it back on, That's when you install this thing. You can't just unplug it, recalibrate it, and unplug it back in. You have to literally detach the whole thing. Then you turn the car off, you drain the battery, the thing goes to its regular spot, and then you put the new one on. That's one thing that you know. Another thing is don't hook electrical up to drain it. And there was something else. The very people know how to calibrate this thing. There's too much dumbness on the internet. The point is, I did it once. It was a faulty whatchamacallit. I did it again. I'm an idiot, of course. I put the wire behind it. I lifted it somewhat. I slid the wire, connect off, and then I did it a third time. Put it on. So that thing's a pain in the butt. The only thing that's more of a pain in the butt is doing it 3 times on a rainy day with a sprained muscle in your back, on a dirt ground and annoying neighbors. That kind of imperfect thing. And hunts. I had to take this apart a million times. Not this one, but the one that's up there. And at some point, I took it apart so well that this thing came apart. And then I'm pushing it back together. And each time, or whenever I have, I'm pushing it back on a diagonal. It wears out the plastic. That's how the plastic wore out, by this thing going on an angle. And then now the plastic is loose and everything. Plastic is literally being worn thin by forcing this thing through it instead of having it perfectly parallel, putting it through it, making sure with your hand it is exactly flush and parallel, and then tightening this thing. That's the trick to these switches. It has to be exactly right before you tighten this thing. Can't tighten this thing to push it on. You got to push it on at a parallel, hold it on, and then tighten this thing. And then once it's like this, you need not do that every time. Once you loosen this thing, they shouldn't come apart. Yeah, they should stay together. Then this thing will last forever. People are worried about the plastic knob and stuff. Well, if I say it'll last a long time, it suddenly won't, but pretty much it will. Then these things are good.